Now? Okay, perfect. Thank you very much. Good morning, everyone. Dear distinguished guests from the German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development, Mario Lotz, the COP28 and the COP29 presidency, Dan McQueen and Mir Mosum Dadashev, the International Energy Agency, Thomas Bredariol, the Global Water Institute, Greg Leslie, and the US Department of Energy, Alejandro Moreno. Dear colleagues, I would like to warmly welcome you here at the GIZ campus in Bonn, and of course also our online participants all over the world to today's event on watering the clean energy transition. Let me also extend my appreciation to the Alliance for Global Water Adaptation, the World Meteorological Organization, the Water Initiative for Net Zero, and others for organizing this important event today. Today's session serves as an unofficial kick-off for the Bonn Climate Change Conference 2024 and marks a decisive moment to harness the power of water to accelerate our race against time to reduce emissions and combat the triple water, climate, and energy crisis. The event builds on the outcomes of the COP28 by sharing the insights of the groundbreaking report done by UN Water, WMO, and international universities on the global water demand to achieve the 1.5 degrees goal of the Paris Climate Agreement. As we all know, we are facing an immense challenge of securing our vital resources such as water, energy, and food. Scarce natural resources increasingly exploited, while at the same time the demand for fresh water, agriculture products, and energy is rising. Climate change is exacerbating the situation and adversely affecting water availability and quality, with detrimental impacts on the energy sector in particular. All forms of energy rely heavily on water, be it to move turbines, to grow fuel in terms of bioenergy, or to be used for cooling purposes. At the same time, extracting, treating, and distributing water requires energy inputs, as does treating and disposing wastewater. The water sector itself is responsible for more than 10% of global anthropogenic greenhouse gas emissions. According to current estimates, the global energy consumption is expected to rise by 50% by 2050, which will further increase the pressure on scarce water resources and lead to unreliable energy networks and rising energy prices, affecting vulnerable groups the most while exacerbating inequalities. At the same time, the world faces the challenge of an energy transition to achieve the 1.5 degree goal, which also means an immense increase in the production and use of technology for renewable energies. And here, the things get even more tricky. As you will see today, this requires tremendous water resources, which are already scarce, and competition for them will even increase in the future. As such, Sustainable and cross-sectoral solutions at the interface of water, energy, and climate are urgently required to successfully overcome the triple crisis. We all need to focus on integration and joint thinking. To this end, GIZ is spearheading integrated approaches worldwide along the nexus water, energy, and climate, with a particular focus on the MENA region, Sub-Saharan Africa, as well as Latin America and the Caribbean. We have learned from nexus projects in these regions and are now starting to mainstream such thinking into our portfolio. In particular, we promote renewable and low carbon energy, and such as green hydrogen, strengthen capacities to increase energy efficiency in the water sector, and improve wastewater management to support our partner countries in achieving the 1.5-degree goal while safeguarding healthy ecosystems and human well-being. Furthermore, we actively promote water at multilateral level, such as the UN Climate Change Conferences, while strengthening synergies with other sectors. To sum it up, water is the key lever for a clean energy transition. We need to act now and decisively to reduce emissions and speed up the clean energy transition to reach the 1.5-degree goal and prevent devastating consequences for the people, economies, and our entire planet. Furthermore, we need to acknowledge the interconnectedness between the sectors water, energy, and climate, and promote targeted integrated solutions. Thereby, we need to harness the power of water as a resilience multiplier in leveraging both climate adaptation and mitigation goals and safeguarding a just energy transition. We need to mainstream water in the global climate and energy discourse and place it at the center of our political agenda. Without new thinking about water resources, we will not be able to achieve the 1.5-degree goal, nor to feed the world in the decades to come. Last but not least, we need to step up our efforts and foster alliance with the key stakeholders from governments, the private sector, and the civil sector in the field of water, energy, and climate to successfully tackle the challenges in the water, energy, and climate sector. Only by joining forces can we achieve a water and energy secure as well as climate resilient future for all. Thank you very much and thank you for your attention, and I'm looking forward to an insightful session and fruitful discussions. Thank you very much.
Fantastic, thank you. Thank you very much. And we'll now turn to the second speaker, Dane McQueen, Senior Advisor, Ministry of Foreign Affairs, United Arab Emirates. The floor is yours, sir. Yeah.
Thank you so much, John. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. In addition to being from the UAE Ministry of Foreign Affairs, I was also the Action Agenda Director for COP28 So I hope that you feel that we made a step in the right direction in terms of raising the profile and some of the solutions around water. One of the, I think, recurring themes that we heard at COP28 was how people felt that water has been very underrepresented in the agenda over the last several years, particularly given that so many people experience climate change through water. So with Azerbaijan also prioritizing this space and the NDCs coming up in February, I think this is sort of the window to help push this shift. As John said, there was an overwhelming implicit amount of water content in the decisions that came out of COP28, moving to 1.5, moving away from fossil fuels, tripling renewables, aligning with the global biodiversity framework, and then in the action agenda, big declarations on food, which is all about water efficiency in many ways, a declaration on water and food investment in fragile countries, and then a whole slew of water-specific initiatives around urban efficiency, around freshwater conservation, and the list goes on. So what we're sensing right now is, the kind of appetite, and I'll just focus on the narrow UNFCCC world, not, kind of the broader world, but to bring this content into these documents that will be the primary political focus for the next 2 years. What we've also heard is that a lot of parties don't appreciate, let's say, a kind of didactic or prescriptive approach to NDC, saying like, where is your water content? And you said you were going to do this and you didn't. What seems to be working better right now is to offer assistance and saying, if you are interested in this space and you would like to waterproof your NDC, you would like to include water in your energy content and your food content, et cetera, here are resources that are available to help you. And it's I know from people in this room, this is kind of the community that steps in. So I would say this is also the moment to be very vocal about the resources that are available. And as we move closer to UNGA, UN General Assembly, and then COP29, we're expecting these first waves of countries, the kind of early movers, to come forward and say, yes, I'm going to go really big on water in my NDC or some other sector that's nationally appropriate. And this can be the place where those resources really push people from the, I'm interested, but not going to do much, to here's my kind of soft commitment and now my hard commitment in 2025. I would also flag from the Emirati kind of national side, after all the fun we had hosting COP28, we've decided to punish ourselves again and reward ourselves by hosting the 2026 Water Conference. Hopefully that will be resolved very soon. It's looking like it'll probably be with us and Senegal. And we are very excited and committed to take forward the water energy content from COP28 and help build that kind of 2-year roadmap through COP29 and COP30 and Dushanbe and Stockholm and the other milestones. So really looking forward to getting into more details with you. First, getting through this kind of NDC hurdle, and then in parallel on the solution space that hopefully lands in 2026. So thank you again, and see you on the circuit.
Now we'll transition to our keynote speaker, Dr. Greg Leslie, who I believe is online. Dr. Greg Leslie, as you can read very well, is the director for the Global Water Institute, the University of New South Wales in Australia. Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's a real pleasure to be with you this morning. I'm coming to you from Sydney, Australia, which is the traditional home of the Bidjigal people, and I'd like to pay my respects to the original custodians of the land and water on which I am at the moment, and extend those respects to any Indigenous people that are online or listening in the room in Bonn. I think I can't control the slides from my end, so if someone in the room could be kind enough to advance the slides, that would be great. Excellent. Look, the purposes of today is to present on behalf of the International University Climate Alliance, a network of some 40+ universities around the world that are committed to using their knowledge and expertise to assist organisations in their quest towards stabilising the climate and moving to a low carbon future. We are going to talk today on a summary of the key findings of the Water for Climate Mitigation report, which are attempts to estimate the global freshwater requirements for a suite of climate mitigation measures that were listed in the IPCC 6 report. Could I have the next slide, please? This work was commissioned by the UN Water Expert Group on Water and Climate, along with WMO, UNESCO and UNEC. It was, could I have the next slide? It started at this meeting in Bonn in 2023 with a discussion that then progressed to a call within our network for experts that could assist on preparing the report. An interim report was delivered at the COP conference in Dubai, and that was a special event organised by WMO, and then it featured in an event organised by the COP Presidency. There's a copy of the report, the final report, on the left-hand side of that slide, and I'll give you the QR code at the end of this presentation where you can download a copy. Could I have the next slide, please? So, as our speakers before pointed out, our task was to come up for estimates for the water required to meet a suite of clean energy, as well as some agriculture, forestry and other land users measures that were identified in the IPCC 6 report. To simplify the task, we had to make a range of assumptions. And one of the first ones is that we would pick a climate benefit in gigatons of greenhouse gas per year that could be achieved at the $100 per tonne target. Could I have the next slide, please? As speakers before have identified, a lot of the clean energy measures feature heavily in countries' nationally determined contributions to meeting the Paris targets. We relied very heavily on the recent estimates from the IEA's report on the net zero roadmap, a global pathway to keeping the temperature of the global increase to 1.5 degrees centigrade in reach. Can I have the next slide, please? From the IPCC 6 report, we looked at the estimated climate benefit in gigatons of carbon per year for 6 options: the use of hydropower to dispatch solar and wind into the grid, the production of electricity via nuclear energy and geothermal, the production of hydrogen as an energy carrier to be substituted into a range of options, the production of liquid biofuels, mostly for the aviation industry, and the rollout of lithium-ion batteries to meet the demands of the fleet of vehicles that are rated at 3 tonnes and below. For each of those options, different experts from around the country who are listed in the report looked at the water dependencies per unit of, say, of production. For example, the amount of water required to produce a kilogram of hydrogen, or the water associated with a terawatt hour of lithium-ion storage capacity. Could I have the next slide, please? Those numbers and the assumptions on which they are based are listed in the report, but they were converted into a quotient or a metric to reflect the tonnes of carbon that could be abated per megalitre of water used. If we look at this chart, as Dane pointed out, it's not to punish or downgrade one option over the other, as they all will be important, but really it was intended to show a relative ranking. If we look at geothermal energy, a lot of the benefit of that is associated with the energy that's inherent inside the warm thermal liquid. That's why we see a very high benefit in terms of tonnes of carbon abated per megalitre of water involved in the process. At the other end of the scale, if you track water used in the lithium battery supply chain all the way from mining through to manufacturing, there's quite a big demand, such that the tonnes of carbon abated by offsetting internal combustion engines associated with the 3-tonne light-duty vehicles is only 1.7 tonnes for every megalitre of water used. What is more important is the overall scale of the investment in water that will be needed to meet the targets identified for the growth of all of these sectors by 2030 in the IEA report. We estimate that it will require approximately 900 cubic kilometres, or about 30% of the global irrigation withdrawals. Noting that about 85% comes of that is associated with the production, the growth, refining of biofuels, particularly for the aviation industry, and batteries for those light-duty electric vehicles. Could I have the next slide, please? However, it's not all bad news. The IEA Net Zero Roadmap also identifies that over the period of 2023 to 2030, there will be a decline in unabated thermal coal, from approximately 63 ettajoules in 2022 down to 40 ettajoules. Even if we account for the slight growth in clean carbon and capture from thermal coal, which will go from 1 terawatt to 156 terawatts, this will save approximately 16,158 gigalitres, which is about 72% of the water associated with the growth in nuclear, geothermal, and pumped hydro over the same period. So while there'll be some dependencies on the new clean energy options, we will get some savings back associated with the phasing out of the fossil fuel options. Could I have the next slide, please? To put these in context, we also looked at some measures that were listed in the IPCC 6 report associated with agriculture, forestry, and other land uses, which we referred to as the natural sequestration measures, as well as some of the engineered sequestration measures. These included the development of the direct air capture technology, which we all agree is still in its infancy, but also the use of biomass associated with carbon capture and storage to feed into our energy supply. We also looked at afforestation options, both in arid and tropical climates, as well as water required to maintain peatlands. Again, we took the climate benefit from the IPCC 6 report at the $100 a tonne mark, and the experts calculated how much water would be required to meet that. Next slide, please. Again, expressing it as that quotient of tonnes of carbon per megalitre of water invested, peatlands are the most effective form of the natural solutions. Interestingly, wetlands, there's a lot of work to be done on really quantifying the water dependency. There's a big gap in the literature and in our knowledge on what we need to keep our fresh wetlands functioning. In the afforestation, obviously the climate benefit in the tropics, where less water is needed to grow timber, is much greater than what it is in the arid regions where considerably more water is required. Direct air capture, of course, based on the current literature, is a highly water efficient process. However, the project hasn't really been demonstrated beyond the pilot scale. The growth of biomass, coupled with the water requirements to capture the carbon and sequester it, give it around about 2.5 tonnes of carbon per megalitre, or comparable to the growth of forests in very, very arid regions. Next slide, please. So I'd like to conclude at this point. I hope that the presentation provides some points for further discussion. I'd like to thank all my colleagues at the International University Climate Alliance, both the technical experts and the wonderful support staff who help pull the report together. Next slide, please. If you'd like to get a copy of the report and to have a look at it now, you may care to scan this QR code and download a copy, and it'll be available if you want to look at that while the deliberations go on. With that, we'd be happy to take any questions either now or when we get towards the Q&A session in this presentation. Thank you.
Do we have time for questions now, or one or two questions? It'd be fantastic if we had some reactions, interventions, questions. There's a lot of rich material that Dr. Leslie has just presented to us. Any reactions from the audience? Please, Tony.
Thanks. Tony Slatcher is my name. I'm presently an advisor to the UN Water Expert Group on water and climate change. I just wanted to alert people that this is the first time this kind of data has ever been compiled and presented. We've had parts of this story told before by major reports by CIWI and by GIZ, as I recall, in the last 3 years. But this is the first time, as you go into the report, you'll see the depth of and range of analysis that this covers. So we are privileged, I think, to be hearing this from Greg, Leslie now, that the first people to hear it, that these are this is sort of the beating heart of the issue of water and climate mitigation, and there's a lot of work for us all to do as we think through the implications of this and how we can see water as part of the climate solution and get into the practices of governments to think naturally as water as one of the key inputs to their NDCs. And that debate, I hope, can proceed over the course of this week, help with this report. Thank you.
That's a fantastic point. Dr. Leslie, maybe to rephrase that as a question, well, what do you see as some of the next steps in being able to engage with the energy transition policy initiatives with your report?
Thanks. That's an excellent question. So the group operated at the global scale because the IPCC 6 report identified how many gigatons of carbon would need to come out for each option. So the data that we're presenting looks at the global scale. In the report, there are a suite of references that have the granular information that countries can use to perform the calculations at the local level, which again really is where the real work needs to happen. So we're not talking about punishing any or being critical of countries that have biofuels in their NDCs. We're just pointing out that based on the literature, it's a very water-intensive way to offset carbon, but it may be the appropriate way to avoid burning fossil fuels, so it's the right thing to do. Similarly, the electrification and the replacement of internal combustion engines with electric vehicles has a high water dependency, but it will result in the reduction in significant amounts of fossil fuels. So I think the next step is to look at it at the national and local level and to see what options make sense.
Thank you. Other questions? One of the questions maybe that I have is specifically in regard to Brazil and COP 30. Brazil is one of those countries that is very biofuels intensive, as I understand it, and it seems like they may actually be able to have a kind of special role in being able to demonstrate maybe a more sophisticated approach for that COP. Have you been able to work with them, or is that maybe part of your next step as well?
So the biofuels is a particularly interesting area. Not only people within the Climate Alliance, but also Potsdam University have made a lot of progress on the water dependencies of biofuel. And I noted that when I was at COP28, I visited the Association of Biofuels that had a big pavilion in the green zone, and it's acknowledged that they're going to be part of a transition to a net zero future. Biofuels are interesting, particularly the second generation biofuels. With correct crop rotation, they can be very useful in restoring land. If the wastewater is managed effectively, that can be reused. So there is a lot of technical opportunities to both improve the quality of the land and also improve the efficiency of the process and create a circular economy with some of those biofuels. Also, they can do it in a way without placing a burden on the on crop production for food.
Fantastic. Thank you. We'll now move to the next speaker. Because of time zone issues, Mike Rinker at the U.S. Department of Energy. He's a senior technical advisor there on energy efficiency and renewable energy. Is going to speak to us by recorded message. He's part of the water team at the U.S. Department of Energy, which I thought it's not something that I knew of even in my own country, really before a few months ago.
So we can't figure it out. It worked before. Maybe we should just continue with the panel discussion and have it after the panel discussion.
Good morning.
We will try to make it work.
And thank you for the nice introduction.
Oh, no, it's working.
I do apologize that I'm not there in person, but I'm really truly honored to be able to provide some remarks to you regarding the U.S. Department of Energy and the nexus of energy and water. And I want to preface my remarks by saying that many may be asking the question right off the bat, why is DOE so interested in the nexus of energy and water, and in particular, the water aspect of this? So to answer that question, let's start with the mission of the DOE. And I will talk about some other things that we're doing after that. So according to DOE's website, the mission of the Department of Energy is to ensure America's security and prosperity by addressing its energy, environmental, and nuclear challenges through transformative science and technology solutions. Well, that's a very simple set of words. There are many layers to our mission, and I'm going to focus on our involvement in energy and water. And so the first question is, why is DOE even involved at all? Well, I don't think I have to tell this group that energy and water are very closely linked. As you know, we use a lot of energy for water in things like conveyance of water or treatment of water, desalination of water, as well as cooling for data centers, just to name a few. And we also use water for energy. Obviously, we use water for hydropower or conduit power, but we also use a lot of water for cooling of thermal plants, as well as many others. As strongly coupled systems, these are very dependent upon each other. They share efficiencies and vulnerabilities, and thus their ability to withstand changes in events like extreme weather events. Recognizing this and being aware of this interdependence is so critical to successfully addressing many energy and environmental challenges. This is a simple example. A community that has a scarcity of water due to climate change and other factors, there may be several ideas to solve that problem, like, well, maybe we can pipe it from a long distance away, or maybe we can clean up some brackish groundwater and use that kind of water. Well, there are some very significant energy and, of course, cost implications associated with this. As we begin to think about how to solve these problems, we need to provide information, technology, and other resources to the community in order to help them decide what's in their best interest. And thinking of that simple example above, we really view this as an integrated systems approach or integrated systems solution. And that's what DOE has been very good at throughout its history. While this all sounds good, solving these integrated or system challenges require a deep technical understanding of how climate, water, energy, carbon, and human systems interact. And it's these interactions that can really inform efficient and resilient systems of the future. I should add that these new systems cannot be designed based on what we've done in the past or what has occurred in the past. Due to climate change, we really have to think about what's going to change. So these systems need to be flexible in order to meet the future challenges, but they also have to be technically and scientifically sound. At the Department of Energy, including our national labs, again, we have that systems perspective. We're looking at the energy and water systems together rather than separately. That helps us advance the science, technologies, and innovations that are going to be needed to ensure safe, sufficient, secure, and affordable water and energy. And we do this across a spectrum from basic science, applied research, development, demonstration, all the way to deployment, as well as through technology innovation in a very cyclical way. We're using an approach coined by our Office of Science, research to operations to research, or R2O2R. While I cannot go into too much detail, there are a number of activities that we at DOE are working on, which include Earth and environmental system research, modeling and analysis, planning, financial and assessment tools, and technical and direct technical support to manufacturers, wastewater treatment facility research, workforce development so that we have the people to maintain and provide services for operations in the future. We're also looking at new beneficial uses of what we call non-traditional water sources, those water sources that we could not use beforehand. We're also doing this across multiple sectors, including municipalities, industry, utilities, agriculture, resource extraction like oil and gas or mining, and of course our energy systems as we try to make that energy transition to clean energies. So how are we doing this? Are we doing it in a vacuum? Well, as you know, as a large department within the US government, we are stovepipe like all large organizations. So how do we think of this at the department? And how, and more importantly, how can we act upon this in some sort of a coordinated fashion that can be beneficial? So currently, the department is using what we're calling cross-cutting teams of experts in a number of areas, and energy water is one of them. We've organized a very diverse team from across the department who are working on energy water programs and projects to begin to truly figure out how we can work together and coordinate. So we are currently, at this point, developing a strategy for the energy water across the Department of Energy for the clean energy transition. This includes examining new challenges for things like hydrogen, data centers, mining and critical materials, multi-scale resilience, carbon dioxide reduction, and sequestration, and of course, emerging contaminants like PFAS. This strategy will help us to meet the administration's goals and do that in a way so that we're all rowing the boat in the same direction. But the Department of Energy is only one department of many in the US government that are either directly engaged in the nexus of energy and water, or they're at least peripherally involved based upon their own agency's mission. So the big questions here are, how can we collaborate among agencies? Do we even know what the other agencies are doing? Can we find common goals? So to address this, our US Congress has authorized the Department of Energy to create, in conjunction with colleagues at the US Department of the Interior, a new coordination office called the Nexus of Energy and Water for Sustainability, or NEWS for short. And they want us to form, as part of that, an interagency coordination committee. So we've been authorized, and now we have the mandate to lead the DOE and the other federal agencies to develop common federal goals and coordinated plans on these energy water activities, as well as to issue a strategic plan, if that's possible, that would include the priorities and objectives as we move through this clean energy transition. And we're currently working through the necessary efforts in order to form that coordination office. If we can bring together what we're doing internally at DOE, along with working hand in hand with our necessary interagency partners, we can truly lead the nation to really create more resilient, equitable, efficient, and safe interdependent energy and water systems. Now, let me shift gears for a moment and maybe give you a few examples of some of DOE's current programs and projects associated with energy and water. Our Office of Science has a very long history of doing climate and hydrological system modeling based upon observational data. And over the past, they've started to incorporate additional sectors like the energy sector, the industrial sector, the agricultural sector, which includes land use and land use change, as well as others. And most recently, which is really important, they have begun to incorporate what we call human or community behavior into their modeling efforts. And while they're certainly not going to be predictive, they can provide various scenarios in which decisions made at the community level can help them as they make these long-range decisions for their community. Another area that we're looking at is what we call regional energy water demonstrations. While we all know that energy water challenges are global, we also strongly believe at the Department of Energy that the solutions will be very local or regional. So to test that, we are actually preparing to initiate a study with the National Academies of Science to perform an independent consensus study. So we will see if they actually validate this. We think they will. We also have what we call the National Alliance for Water Innovation, or NAWI, which is an innovation hub. That innovation hub, which has been around for 5 years, is now being extended for another 5 years at this point in time. But their challenge is to really unlock the idea of beneficial use of non-traditional waters, which would include things like brackish water, produced water, or industrial water. So as they look at some of those solutions, we're also looking at other things, for example, in water treatment. So we're investing a significant amount of funding in the wastewater treatment, including getting some accurate carbon dioxide quantification and reduction, resource recovery from waste products, and integration of clean energy technologies into those wastewater treatment plants. So as we look forward, we are building on, and we look forward to building on what we're currently doing and the strategy that we're developing and the conversations here today that we're having to put together a framework that we will share with you for a more resilient future. We really welcome continued international discussions and partnerships at this level. So again, thank you so much for your time today, and I hope we can continue the conversation regarding such an important topic.
To make sure that the video actually played. I'd like to ask the members of our panel to come up to the front, please. And maybe in the transition, I'd like to say, where is our direction of travel this morning? I love one of the phrases that you used, Frau Hübner, about the idea of water as this resilience multiplier. That this is actually a powerful idea that's really kind of fueling cooperation across sectors. Mr. McQueen's statement about kind of flowering of water actually in COP28, that it's actually going into new channels, new issues, a sophistication of the issues in the policy landscape. And then the remarkable insights from Dr. Leslie and his team in terms of how we are starting to see and quantify the role of water to inform needs and potentially trade-offs that need to happen with energy and carbon sequestration versus other sectors. This is a remarkable progression and statement. And then we heard words from one country, the US, and their particular initiatives. And I'll say the US, just as an example, more than half of the water in the US is actually employed for energy. In contrast to, say, Mexico, our neighbor, where more than 80% of the water is applied for agriculture. And if anything, that percentage in the US is actually increasing. It gives you some sense about what the most advanced economies need to invest in for growth and for their own prosperity. It's investing in water itself in the nexus that we are here to talk about. And that's where we turn to our panel. We have really 4 panelists. Tony will come on a bit later. Oh, okay. Yeah, all right. I'm happy to be corrected. And I have a set of questions for each of you. And I'd like to begin with Mr. Shodmanov. If you could, he's from the Republic of Tajikistan. Tajikistan is one of the primary water towers of Central Asia, arguably of Asia, and plays a strong regional role in that sense. At the same time, it's a country that's going through many kinds of changes, climatic, not least among them. What can the global climate community learn from your experience in developing a clean energy portfolio while stewarding what is arguably your most important natural resource? There's a button down at the bottom.
Thank you very much for giving me the floor. Yes, you're right. Tajikistan serves as a vital water tower for the region and makes some steps for development of its clean energy portfolio through the hydropower potential in the region and ensuring some sustainable management of these natural resources. Now we have some let's say some transition steps using the water and clean energy, making some national efforts to build some hydropower plants and to increase the clean energy transition to other countries. Let's say now we have some initiative on connecting the Central Asia with the South Asia to provide some clean energy. On the national level, the governments also engaging with the local communities to provide them information how to use this clean energy through the renewable energies using the solar, wind, and the water. Also, in the past decades, Tajikistan developed some national programs on building the small hydropower plants. And now we are seeing the ways to again to develop some kind of programs to give some transition to the clean energy. A lot of actions are done on the national level. Let's say one of these actions through the inclusion of these electric mobiles. Nowadays, we can see in Tajikistan a lot of electric mobile vehicles. It's also some kind of let's say the transitions in the transport sector. So of course, the charging of the vehicles coming from the hydropower energy, and now in an urban area, in the large cities like capital of Tajikistan, in Dushanbe, now there is some ideas to put the solar panels too, to provide some kind of also clean energy to the on-grid, on-grid. So this is some steps, and of course we're also ensuring the sustainable development steps and actions, ensuring to provide some kind of showcase of the country's commitments to reducing the carbon, and also ensuring the mitigation of the environmental impacts too. As I said, we also giving some importance to engage the local communities to such extent in decision making processes. And so in conclusion, I can say that also we provide some, let's say, maybe valuable lessons, not only to the region, maybe to the global communities, how to use the water. We have also some initiatives in a efficient irrigation practices, promoting some water conservation methods and steps. Of course, we need to set some responsible steps how to conserve the water in the face of the climate change challenges too. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So those are strong messages about how in a country that has such a strong agricultural economy, especially about how to think at a more regional level, about changing the portfolio of energy sources, such as in Dushanbe moving into solar, also altering the transport sector, and then thinking about water as an increasingly precious resource, as essentially shifting value of water itself, trying to rebalance water between agriculture and energy. Very useful approach, and also interesting too that it's not just Central Asia when you think of a regional approach, that it's actually extending to South Asia. So very, very helpful and very, very positive. Thank you very much. I'm going to turn next to Tomas, who is an analyst for the International Energy Agency and working on energy and environmental policy. Tomas, can you hear me okay?
I can. Can you hear me okay?
Very well, yeah, thank you.
Great.
Yes, and I'm curious, in your work, you especially, I want to touch on this last point that we just heard from Mr. Shodmanov about this idea of trade-offs in how we spend water in different areas. Are there specific policy levers that maybe help us think about the trade-offs between water and energy, or energy versus other key economic sectors?
Thank you, and many thanks for inviting me to this discussion. Certainly, there are many cases. I think a very clear one is how we cool our thermal power stations, right? In general, if you go to a coal power plant, you will see once through systems, essentially you're circulating the water to cool down the power plant. That uses a lot of water, so this is water that is being withdrawn and then given back. But it's really substantial volumes. Now you can reduce that drastically by implementing a technology of dry cooling, which essentially uses no water. But this comes at a relatively high energy cost. This means you need to use a lot of energy essentially to pump air instead of pumping water. So there's a very clear trade-off there between energy and water. We could perhaps another prominent example is desalination. We did analysis this year for the World Water Day on how much energy is going into desalination plants, and how it's really seeing an incredible growth. It's doubled in the last couple of decades. It's supposed to double again to the end of this decade. And this is essentially using a lot of energy to push water through membranes or other filtration technologies so that we can have fresh water. So again, a very clear trade-off. But I wanted to come back to a few other points that were made, I think that are important to have in mind here. We've heard a lot about how water is needed in energy systems, from fossil fuel extraction to biofuel conservation to electricity generation. It's key. We heard a bit less about how energy is important to extract water from lakes, rivers, oceans, lift it from aquifers and pump it, treat it, and deliver it to uses. So I wanted to highlight this is a very important topic as well. And there's a large role, for example, reducing losses in water systems that could bring important benefits for energy, for example. And then in turn, these lower energy demand would result in lower water demand. So there are many areas of synergy between water and energy management. And this is a topic that at the International Energy Agency we have been looking into at least since 2018, when we released our special World Energy Outlook report on the water energy nexus. And it's something we've been coming back to time and again to highlight, a few critical aspects. One of them is just how important climate change is for both, right? Climate change will continue to exacerbate water stress and energy needs. We will have different precipitation patterns. This will lead to more frequent droughts and floods. We will also see rising temperatures, which will require more energy for cooling, and then we will need more water as well. So as we see the climate change, we're going to see more stress between this nexus of water energy. And I also wanted to highlight another topic that this one we released last year that looked exactly at what are the water requirements in our net zero emission scenario by 2050. So, and we were looking at the short term, essentially comparing the scenario under current policies and the IEA's net zero emission scenario in this timeline. And what we see is that actually a shift to clean energy can help ease the water crisis. If you compare this big energy growth that is happening and is probably going to happen in the next years in current policy settings, we see an increase of about 20 billion cubic meters of water being used to 2030. Whereas if we look at a net zero emission scenario, there's a reduction of nearly 20 billion cubic meters. So certainly there's, as the energy sector evolves, its needs will change and water will keep being an important part of the equation. But as we invest more in solar and wind, we will have probably less water needs than we continue investing in a power sector that is largely driven by fossil fuels like coal, gas, and also in the transport sector, oil. Because we shouldn't forget that producing that oil and that gas and that coal, that is also something that requires quite a lot of water. In the extractive industries, water is used to drill wells, to transport fuels, to control dust from coal, to in all parts of the supply chain. So transitioning from a fossil fuel-based system is also an opportunity to reduce water needs.
That's fantastic. You talked about a remarkable, I think, set of benefits. It would be really easy to talk about water as a kind of threat to the clean energy transition, but what I think you really described was a series, Tomas, of co-benefits, and maybe kind of recharacterizing for us, especially wind and solar as particularly dry forms of energy, and coal is maybe a shockingly wet form of energy that we can actually see possibly some shift. I was really impressed with your phrase that that actually clean energy may help reduce the water crisis or severity in many countries. A very positive statement. I'd like to now turn to Sonja Koppel. She is the Executive Director at the UN Economic Commission of Europe, the UNECE, and the Water Convention. Sonja, the UNECE is very famous for its work for quite some time now on transboundary water cooperation, not just in Europe, despite the first E in UNECE, but also now globally, and seeing itself as a global water sharing convention. It's also famous, I think, for really being one of the early leads in thinking about climate adaptation and water sharing, and I think instrumental in raising that as an issue in many contexts. Why is it also important for us to be thinking about water and climate mitigation in a transboundary context?
Thank you very much for this question and for inviting us here today. So indeed, under the Water Convention, we have been promoting the water energy cooperation for more than 10 years. Actually, the meeting of the parties, which is a global intergovernmental body on water, has been already in 2012 deciding to look at this topic by creating a task force on water and the energy food ecosystem nexus, and introducing specific activities in this field at the time when DRZ also started working on the nexus. And actually, we have been working also together, cooperating with DRZ, and I would like to thank DRZ for example, applying the transboundary nexus assessment methodology in several basins around the world. And I think we've also all highlighted that we need to also consider the ecosystem dimension in all these discussions. So indeed, actually, looking at the transboundary dimension, we can see that disputes are often related to energy, to hydropower, for example. On the other hand, we can also see that transboundary agreements often include energy issues, and for example, in the Senegal are actually based on the sharing on shared energy infrastructure, or also in the Paranya and the Itaipu or other parts of the world. So it's a close relation between water and energy in transboundary cooperation. And that is so important because several countries worldwide really depend on water from other countries, for example, Hungary or Uzbekistan or Turkmenistan in Central Asia. And globally, more than 60% of all freshwater resources are shared by 2 or more countries. But according to the latest figures, really from 2026, only 26 countries actually have operational arrangements for water cooperation for all their shared basins. And this means that all those countries which don't have transboundary agreements are not fit for the new pressures, and particularly for those coming from climate change. So this issue really needs global attention, and that's why under the Water Convention we have been working on this, and we are working now on preparing an action-oriented document on mainstreaming transboundary cooperation into NDCs and NAPs, and also mainstreaming WASH. Also, this issue of climate mitigation really requires increased attention in future NDCs, as it was already stressed by John and others earlier today. And that's why this study, which IOCA presented today, is quite important. And while we do not know exactly how much energy is needed for the clean energy transition, and it clearly shows that we need more research in this field, we do know that the energy transition requires also water, especially certain types of energy. And we need to better look at this issue and include it in future NDCs. And particularly with regards to shared basins, as I already said, there can be tension regarding hydropower, but also potentially in the future due to biofuels or hydrogen or other issues. So what can be possible solutions? Really, we believe that regional cooperation on water, but also on energy actually is crucial. Because having regional power grids, for example, can help countries to exchange energy over long distances. And it's already happening in certain parts of the world where now regional power grids are being constructed in Western Africa, in Eastern Africa, also in parts of Europe, etc. And this can actually be similar to what's already happening in some cases on water cooperation. So there can be opportunities by better regional cooperation on energy and water. But we need good practices, we need basin level solutions. And that's why under the Water Convention we have been, for example, cooperating with our own energy division in developing a toolkit for energy planners on how to consider water and transboundary cooperation, which was published in 2020. And as I said, we have been doing transboundary nexus assessments leading to concrete synergistic solution for water and energy, for example, in the Ciadaria, in the Alazani, in Northwest Sahara Aquifer System, and other basins. And all this is coming together under the Task Force on the Water for Energy System Nexus, as already mentioned, and will also be included in the future program of work of the Water Convention, which is currently under development and which will be adopted at the meeting of the parties of the Water Convention in October in Slovenia. To conclude, I think we need to come together better as the water and energy and climate communities to exactly find the synergistic solution. Thank you.
Excellent. In many ways, the UNECE was really started as a peace-building organization, a way to think about how to think about economic prosperity at a regional transboundary scale, and really thinking about basins like the Danube, where not that long ago we've had countries that were at war with one another. And the idea of thinking of energy sharing as an extension of that is actually really powerful, especially for a water convention. And to move at the scale that actually energy sharing may be a way with virtual water about thinking about really building strong political and economic connections that really are in service of your original purpose and goals. It's very, very powerful, very moving, and quite interesting as a role. So congratulations on that, and also for the discussion of the practical tools that you're creating, both at the level of NDCs and at more operational levels. And now I'm very happy to turn to Nicholas Frank with the World Meteorological Organization, WMO, who is not Tony Slatcher. We have an overabundance of WMO colleagues here, at least in person. And I'd like to now turn to you, Nicholas, and if you could reflect maybe on Greg's talk a little bit. He really showed water as an essential factor for this resilient energy transition. That's such a nice phrase. And I think it's also really interesting and powerful that WMO is involved in this as a weather and climate organization. What should countries, the global community, do to ensure that climate actions are water resilient?
Thanks, John, and thanks to GIZ and also WINS for partnering with WMO on today's event. It's really great to see this picking up. And well, this all started a year ago here at the GIZ premises, who kindly hosted a workshop that we organized within the framework of the UN Water Expert Group on Water and Climate Change, which WMO together with UNECE and UNESCO co-coordinates with several other UN entities, but also partners. And we also invited some of the energy sector also to attend that workshop. And I'm also happy that IEA is one of the panelists today, and we're closely engaging with them. And why did we do that workshop? Because we thought member states in the climate negotiations really have a blind spot when it comes to emission reduction measures and how it relates to water. I think we in the water sector and even the energy sector probably know that there is a link, but and the dependencies of the water sector on energy and the energy sector on water, but the climate policymakers are not talking about it. So why is that happening? And we thought, let's get together, and we got together at a workshop, got over 40 experts to discuss this matter, and we found out that actually, yeah, at the global scale, climate policymakers don't have the information available, the data, and the numbers to raise awareness that, well, we have to take care of water. So out of that workshop, we said, okay, we need to calculate those numbers, to raise the awareness. This is basically our first step. We want climate policymakers to get the attention. Look, if you want to achieve your climate mitigation goals, water will be part of that solution. You need to consider water, you have to manage water properly so that you can implement effectively your mitigation strategy to 2030 in order to stay below 1.5. So we partnered with the International University Climate Alliance, which Greg was leading this study, and I'm also very happy that we came today after 1 year with some results to show here at the SB60. And it is a conference that brings the scientific and technological advice to climate policymakers, right? So it's fresh news for them to consider, and we hope that they will pick that up. And WMO, we are a specialized agency of the UN system focusing on weather. Of course, it's a meteorological organization, but we went into the climate space, and we have the state of the climate report that we present also to COP, and my colleagues are also here. But we are also a specialized agency on water. It says weather, climate, and water. And since 2 years, we are now also publishing the Global State of the Water Resources Report. And we're working with our national meteorological and hydrological services to gather that information and present that at a global scale so that this information is available for the policymakers. What is currently my water situation in my river basin? We have to also develop their capacities to actually analyze that and get the data that they need to provide to the policymakers. Okay, how is my water situation now? How will that evolve in the future? And what kind of mitigation measures should I then implement depending on the dependency on water? And what are the trade-offs that I'll have to make with other sectors? So I think this is all valuable information that needs to be generated at the national level. We have the report at the global level to raise awareness, but of course it always has to be adapted to the national context. And that said, WMO, and we're also trying to partner with a lot of countries, and I'm happy to sit here also on the panel with Tajikistan, a long partner of us, but also the Netherlands, and happy to hear also the US speak today. I'm happy to follow up with the US after this meeting today as well, that we need the countries now in the conference rooms to raise this issue. And we need them to talk about this issue. There are several mitigation work streams, like the Just Transition work stream that happened today and yesterday, the mitigation work stream, the impacts of response measures, where delegates need to raise this issue. And BWMO, we are in the room. We are trying to speak, but today, Tony, my colleague, he was there and he didn't have the time to speak because parties occupied all the time to speak and the observers were not allowed to speak. So that's why parties need to speak first on that, and this is where we have to work. We have to engage with them. We have to provide them with this information so that they include this in their discussions and negotiations, and hopefully we'll bring that as a distinct topic in the climate policy discussions. So I'll stop here, John. Thanks.
Fantastic. And I think a strong message that you're saying is that if you, we can see that this is an issue, but it's also a tractable issue. It's that we need to make sure that we spend our water wisely, essentially. And that I especially love that you brought in the concept of the just transitions, and particularly the idea of a just water transition that needs to happen. So thank you very much for that. It's very, very helpful. And I wasn't at this session a year ago, but it was very powerful from all the parties that I've heard, just about the level of enthusiasm and interest from the parties that were there, the strong interest on the delegates. that, oh, this is something that we're so grateful to have it brought to our attention, because now we can do something about it. Now we know that this is something that we need to focus our efforts on, and that we will solve this. And I'd like to say that water is here to help. So we have two closed note talks, and we're being joined first from Azerbaijan, the host of COP29, and we'll switch now to Mr. Mir Mavsum Dadashev. I hope I've not completely butchered your name, sir. He's the new water representative for the COP29 team, and he's with the Azerbaijan State Water Resources Agency and chairman of the board at the Water and Amelioration Scientific Research Institute. The floor is yours, sir.
Thank you very much. Can you hear me well?
Very well.
Thank you very much for giving me a chance to speak. Unfortunately, I couldn't be there in person. I couldn't travel because of the workload. But I'm honored to address you today, representing the State Water Agency of Azerbaijan and sharing our nation's strides towards achieving the ambitious goals laid out by the first Global Stocktake at COP28. Azerbaijan is proud to host COP29, and we're fully committed to leading by example in our efforts to mitigate climate change and foster sustainable development. Central to this commitment is our recognition of the critical interdependence between water and energy and the essential role of water management in the clean energy transition. Firstly, Azerbaijan has been actively expanding its renewable energy capacity, with a strong focus on harnessing our vast potential in solar and wind. However, we understand that this transition requires substantial water resources. To address this, we have implemented comprehensive water management strategies to ensure that our renewable energy projects are sustainable and don't place undue stress on our water systems. In line with our national water strategy, we have prioritized the conservation and restoration of our natural water bodies and ecosystems. By investing in advanced water recycling and desalination technologies, we are reducing our dependency on freshwater sources and enhancing the resilience of our water supply. These measures are crucial in supporting our goal to triple renewable energy capacity by 2030, as outlined in the Global Stocktake roadmap. Furthermore, Azerbaijan has been at the forefront of developing and deploying zero and low emission technologies. Our efforts in this regard are closely aligned with our commitment to water sustainability. We are implementing best practices in water efficient technologies and promoting the use of non-carbon dioxide emitting energy sources. This includes exploring innovative solutions such as green hydrogen, which, while water intensive, offers a pathway to a cleaner and more sustainable energy future. Recognizing the importance of addressing non-carbon dioxide emissions, we are accelerating our efforts to substantially reduce these emissions by 2030. Our initiatives include improving agricultural practices, enhancing waste management systems, and promoting the use of low-emission fuels. These actions are underpinned by a comprehensive understanding of their water requirements and the need for resilient water management practices. Azerbaijan is also committed to fostering international collaboration and knowledge exchange. We believe that sharing best practices and lessons learned is essential for addressing the complex challenges at the water energy nexus. To this end, we're actively participating in global forums and working closely with international organizations such as UN Water and the International Universities Climate Alliance to advance research and support national level assessments on water dependency and clean energy measures. As we look ahead to COP29 and the 2026 UN Water Conference, Azerbaijan is dedicated to maintaining the political momentum needed to simultaneously address the global water, climate, and energy crisis. We are committed to integrating water considerations into our climate mitigation plans and ensuring that our actions contribute to a sustainable and resilient future for all. In closing, I would like to express my gratitude to GIZ for hosting this important session and to all participants for your valuable contributions. Together, we can ensure that water remains at the forefront of our efforts to achieve a net zero future. And as a host to COP29, looking forward to see you all at COP29 in Baku in November. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. We were really excited to hear that we do have a water liaison in the COP29 team, and you will be very popular with this crowd, I think. So we look forward to meeting you in person in Baku. I'd like to turn now to our last speaker, Mario Lutz, with the Federal Ministry, German Federal Ministry for Economic Cooperation and Development. The floor is yours, Mario.
Thank you.
Ironically, the way to speak is to press the mute button.
And then it works. All right. Thank you, John. And thank you for this opportunity to close this great session. I made very many notes because I took so many things home, but I will make it very short because some people are getting nervous to run to the next session. So let's make it short. Thank you very much, GIZ, Aqua, WMO, for hosting this great session. And thank you to the UN Water Expert Group and the University Alliance. Let me say that right, the International Universities Climate Alliance. I think this report has put great issues on the table that we will all take home, take to the next sessions and use it accordingly. John, you started the session by saying NDCs are not the most sexy instrument, but they are useful. And I don't know if we can apply this one-on-one on the water, energy, climate nexus, but I think what we all take home here is that the water energy nexus is essential for a just transition to net zero. And as Elke has said it, water is the key lever for a clean energy transition. And I think we have learned in this session how water and energy connects and how essential it is to think these two things together. Just one last thing I took home is it's not all bad news. Like if we phase out from coal, we save, I've learned, like 16.15 gigaliters from of water instead of using solar and wind power. And I think this is also a message I take home today, that we're also running to the right direction. It's just necessary to keep in mind that there is definitely water to be considered when looking at the energy transition. And with that, I would say thank you very much to the audience, to all the panelists, the online audience, and I wish you all a great start now with the SB60s in Bonn. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. I'm really glad that you were able to attend, and I am grateful for your attention off-site, and hope that the SB is very successful.